Coming up on Dialogue Weekend, China reviews its 30 years of participation in UN peacekeeping operations. And this week's newsmaker. Now on Dialogue Weekend.
Welcome to Dialogue Weekend. I'm Xu Jinping. As part of its effort to support the mission of the United Nations, China has become a growing force in peacekeeping around the world. Today, in an expanded segment, we'll look at the background and the motivations in China's active participation in UN peacekeeping operations. We'll also explore what more China can do as a permanent member of the UN Security Council to help maintain peace and stability in vulnerable parts of the world. Joining me in the studio to discuss the topic and the recently published white paper on China's peacekeeping efforts is independent current affairs commentator Anna Tangen. We'll also be joined via Skype by Zhang Junshi, researcher at the Naval Research Academy. So welcome to the show, Anna. You know, this is the first time for China to publish a white paper on the specific topic here being this peacekeeping efforts by China. So what is the purpose of this white paper here?
Well, I think it's a contrast to what's happening globally here. I mean, we're having more unrest. There's probably more to come. We need more peacekeepers. But at the same time, Donald Trump has said he's going to reduce the peacekeeping, the support for peacekeeping by 27% in terms of monetary value. I mean, it's a little bit incredible. I mean, China comes in for all sorts of international condemnation for things that it has nothing to do. It can't seem to do anything right by the current powers out there. Yet China consistently and quietly maintains its efforts to multilateralism. So it's not, I'm not just speaking to say nice things about China. I'm saying look at the facts.
Yeah, this is what's happening, right, with China and this multilateral system here. And Junshi, so you have been following this topic obviously for a long time. So what are the key points from the white paper?
Well, from the white paper released yesterday, we can see that during the past 30 years, in which period China participates in the UN peacekeeping operations, we can see that China has acted as a responsible the major state country in the world. It has carried out as much as it could in terms of international responsibilities and duties. And China has become a key force in United Nations peacekeeping force. And we can see that China actually has done a lot and has made great contributions to world peace and development.
So, you know, in the 1990, I remember, if I'm correct, that there were only 5 Chinese peacekeepers in the international operation. But today, it's about like 40,000 Chinese peacekeepers, you know, from obviously, that's a lot of contribution from a country like China. And it's actually, you know, if you look at the situation within the UN Security Council, China offers the largest number of peacekeepers and the second largest funder for the operation. Junshi, tell us, you know, the evolvement of Chinese policy from very little engagement in UN peacekeeping operation to today's active participation. What motivates Chinese policy changes here?
Well, first, I think it's the development of the Chinese national strength, including the military strength. As China develops its strength, we began to send military observers and peacekeeping operations servicemen to the peacekeeping operations from 1990. And over the last 30 years, we, just as you mentioned, we have sent more than 40,000 servicemen and women to the UN peacekeeping operations. And 16 servicemen have sacrificed their lives during their UN peacekeeping operations. I think the reason China participated in the UN peacekeeping forces operations, I think there are some reasons. First, I think that is that the pursuit of peace is the gene of the Chinese nation. The Chinese nation values peace and harmony. And second is the Chinese people care about the well-being of the humanity. The Chinese people always dream of living in a harmonious world where everyone belongs to one and the same family. And third, I think that's because China honors its responsibilities as a major country. And I think this is required, or this is a requirement from the international society.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, China holds UN as the most important international body, in the high place. So China often says, we would like to be a responsible major power in the world. And also, if you look at the Chinese increase of contribution to the UN peacekeeping mission, you would see it coincides with China's growth economically, financially, let's say. So can we say that, as China's financial resources increases, it contributes more and more to the UN peacekeeping operations?
Well, I think it's just very simply that China feels it has ability and a duty to be a good international stakeholder. Go back 10, 12 years ago, remember when all of those instances of piracy were going on in Somalia and all these places. China was criticized because they said, you're not being an international, a responsible stakeholder. You're not doing enough. You need to, share the burden here because you have a lot of shipping. So China took up the reins and said, okay, that's reasonable. They started sending ships there. I mean, most recently, the irony here is that they were asked by an Indian oil trader who said, we need assistance. We need to be escorted through here. And without any ado or making any big fuss about it, 2 Chinese ships came and escorted that ship and a couple of others through very troubled waters. And you could already see the results. I mean, the amount of piracy is way down. Now, this benefits everybody. These ships are not Chinese ships. These are ships that are in international waters. They're flagged by every other country. The trade that is going around doesn't just benefit China, it benefits the whole world. So this notion that, once again, China can't do anything right. If it's asked to be a responsible stakeholder and responds, there must be something behind it. And if God forbid, it didn't, almost, China doesn't care. It's
free rider.
A free rider, exactly. So this is really the conundrum that China faces. But I think in the long run, in the cold light of day, China's actions are going to define how history sees it. And it's not going to be this kind of rhetoric, one-sided, which is trying to always vilify China as somehow not being enough or being too much.
Well, a good point here. There's an allegation that China's active participation in the UN peacekeeping operation comes from China's need to protect its overseas interests. Is that the case?
Okay, yes, China has a lot of trade, but where is that trade going? If they protect an iron ore ship that is coming from South America, or ships that are going to not China, but to other parts of Southeast Asia, China is not the only destination for shipping. So a lot of these peacekeeping missions, not only there on the seas, but also on land, are in response to a troubled world. This year alone, we're going to see 750,000 people, 750 million people added to the food insecure list.
Right.
That means, and 250,000 are going to be actually malnourished. So in these kinds of situations, you have to have international trade. Somebody has to stand in. And during this period of time, people are going to be questioning what's happening for social unrest to occur. If you don't have peacekeepers there to prevent these things, we have seen what happens.
Well, exactly. If China, really wants to protect its overseas interests, there's a lot of investment in European countries and in the United States, even right, Southeast Asia. Not as much as, say, in Africa, where you have, I think, almost a majority of Chinese peacekeepers over there. Yeah,
that's not in their interest. They're doing the right thing, and if they weren't, they would be accused of not caring.
That's right. Junshi, there's also allegation, some say, because China is a UN Security Council permanent member over there, wielding a lot of power. At the same time, China contributes the largest number among the UN Security Council, the Big Five. At the same time, China is also the second largest funder of the UN peace operation over there. So some say, China is playing such a prominent role. There's a concern that whether China will be able to reshape somehow the UN peacekeeping mission to its own interests, or to divert the focus from quote-unquote liberal values. So what's your response to that?
Well, I think such kind of worries or concerns are totally unnecessary. Because just first, I mentioned the reasons why China participates in UN peacekeeping operations is as a responsible power. We should take more and more international responsibilities and duties. And also, during the 30 years of the peacekeeping operations China has taken part in, we can see that China commit itself to the policy stances such as non-involvement, non-interference in other countries' internal affairs, and also we respect the territorial integrity and political independence of sovereign states, and always remains impartial and strictly follows the mandate of the UN Security Council. Just as you mentioned earlier, that apart from the active from the UN peacekeeping operations, also China has also provide other public security goods to the international society, such as the counter-piracy and escort operations in the Gulf of Aden and waters of Somalia. Up to now, the Chinese Imperial Navy has dispatched 36 flotillas of naval warships to this area to conduct counter-piracy and escort operations. It has escorted more than 6,800 merchant vessels, and over half of these merchant vessels were foreign vessels. And actually, China is also protecting the sea lanes of the international society. So China is trying its best to provide more and more public security goods to the international society. And just as you mentioned earlier, some countries may criticize China as a free rider, but now we are trying to do as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's right, and of course, speak of this concern about whether there's diversion from liberal value. But the thing is, like, UN peacekeeping mission itself is supposed to be neutral and impartial, right? You don't involve in the...
It is, because China isn't deciding which missions go on. This is voted for, and it is...
By the UN. Right?
Yes, exactly.
UN, yeah.
So this idea that giving money and troops who are in harm's way to protect people is somehow evil, or somehow some tin hat conspiracy to do something, it really just goes to show how far things have become out of whack.
Mm-hmm. It's not well founded, at least we can say. And also, you mentioned earlier about President Trump has sworn to cut down, to reduce the contribution, the financial contribution to the UN peacekeeping mission by 27%. Obviously, that plus this COVID-19 impact on the global economy. So are you worried about the UN peacekeeping mission might be somehow affected in a negative sense?
Well, it already is being affected. I mean, once you start saying that you're going to draw down things, if you are somebody who's intent on causing harm, you're opening the door, because there won't be anybody stepping in. I mean, the UN was something that was created to make sure that there was talk, not tanks. And this is the mission of the UN, so supporting that is absolutely essential. But when you have the most powerful country in the world, headed by Donald Trump, saying that they don't care or they don't believe in peaceful missions, I mean, it's kind of stark. I mean, the U.S. Can be criticized over the same period of time. They've been locked up in wars, more deaths, more destruction, more chaos throughout the region. So the idea that China is doing something wrong by supporting peace, as I said, it just goes to show how far things are out of whack. How can anybody think this? I don't know.
That's right. Well, let's leave it there for now and take a look at this week's Newsmaker. So a female member of a singing group in South Korea was scolded and apparently slapped by a male in their management team for trying to cover the legs of her colleague. This happened with the camera running during a live broadcast. The incident provides some insight into disturbing practices that occur with young girls in the public eye. How the bodies of the female entertainers are regarded as objects to exploit, and the challenging lives behind the fame and the money and glamour. To get a better understanding of the topic, we are joined by Han Ju-mo, a PhD candidate at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Joseph Kim, a Seoul-based correspondent. And here we have Anna Tangen. So Joseph, we'll start with you here. Are you surprised with what happened? You know, unexpected for a lot of people, right?
I think many people are surprised. I don't think anybody likes to see abuse on any form, especially if it's a live broadcast. And this is even true in South Korea, despite, as you said, the number of instances that we've heard this happen. However, something that we do have to keep in mind is that every year or so, as you said, there is a certain criticism of the K-pop or Korean entertainment industry that seems to somehow suggest that there is this dark side to the South Korean entertainment industry specifically, especially from Western media outlets. And quite frankly, if we begin to peel back the layers of this argument, sometimes it can definitely be one-dimensional and often dehumanizing, especially because this isn't something that is only exclusive to the Korean entertainment industry. If we look at the global entertainment industry as a whole, we see historically how many countries have exploited the women's bodies for profit. And South Korea needs to be held accountable, but we also need to hold other countries accountable as well, instead of making this seem like it's some sort of pandemic happening only in South Korea. We need to allow South Korea to have an argument that is more complex, and also allow intricacies to not look at this as a one-sided event and then connect all the dots as if this is the only thing that is happening within the industry.
Good point. Han Ju-mo here. You know, tell us, for a lot of people who are not familiar with this K-pop scene in South Korea, as Joseph just mentioned. So tell us how to become a K-pop member. You know, how do you join, apply and join, and then become somebody who is famous, let's say? Ju-mo? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, some technical issue here.
Could you repeat your question, sorry?
Yeah.
I couldn't hear.
Okay. Could you tell us, how if a young girl who wants to be famous, be somebody, what's the process of, applying and then joining this K-pop scene to become a member of that? What kind of training she or he needs in order to become a member?
There are various trainings like dancing, acting, singing, or even like playing musical instruments. So there are many trainings, and so girls and boys should spend a lot of years to be selected as an idol group member.
How difficult it is to become, how competitive it is, let's say, to become an idol or successfully at last after years of training?
Actually, that's very difficult. So, you know, there are many dropouts. So many of them give up since the process is too difficult. And some trainees are dropped out by companies. And so many of them are not successfully have their debit, even though they have their debit as an idol group member. Many of the idol groups are quite like disappear relatively in a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anna, you know,
the competition is very intense.
Yeah, you know, of course, like a fierce competition, and for young girls, of course, you want to be somebody, you want to be seen in the stage, singing and dancing, one day to become famous. That's understandable. But obviously, this process of becoming somebody as a celebrity is challenging in every country.
Well, it is challenging. I'm half Korean, and I can tell you I don't approve this idea. I mean, K-pop was started as a deliberate effort by the government to kind of enhance Korea's reputation around the world. But you cannot treat children like trained animals. I mean, they have to be taken care of. A lot of these kids do suffer in terms of the amount of education they get. They're constantly training, dancing, etc., like this. But, you know, for what? Very short periods of time. And they, you know, the amount of money they make, some make it, some don't. And their lives are very lonely and shattered. Now, this is not an isolated incident. I mean, going back a few years, there's that sex scandal involving young men who were treating women like, you know, toys, taking videos of them and thinking it was funny and boasting to each other and posting these videos online. This is not healthy. So yes, you can equivocate and say, oh, it happens in other industries. It doesn't make it right. So the K-pop industry has to take a humane view towards these young people. They can't just you know, rev them up and throw them aside as they get older. So I do think this is something that has to be taken more seriously. And as I said, it doesn't make it right if it's happening somewhere else.
Well, Joseph, you know, like we see the incidents like this, it's not that rare, let's say. What do you blame? Do you blame this management issue? Do you blame this industry-wide problem? Or do you say it's somehow there's a social attitudes or social policy over there to blame?
Well, first of all, I would like to make my position clear and say that I never mitigated the situation that's happening in South Korea. I never said that this isn't a problem that they don't have to take accountability for. I definitely think that they have to take accountability for it. However, as that gentleman in the studio said, this dark side of K-pop is something that many Western media, including all English media, have talked about for so many years when there's this happening in many other places. To say that this is something that is just solely a South Korean problem is what I was pointing out. However, something that we do need to keep in mind is that all industries, most of the entertainment industries, have been dominated, especially for decision-making positions, by males, which is one of the biggest problems for this. And that's why more females do need to be hired in those industries to make sure that they do become safe spaces and ensure that there is protection for these women. If we look at top executives for any entertainment studio, most of the time they are male. Whether it's South Korea, Hollywood, or any other industry, typically that has been a gentleman's industry for entertainment. So therefore, saying right now that this is something that South Korea needs to only look at, that is also problematic, and it also is an Orientalist position to believe that only South Korea is the one facing this problem.
That's nonsense.
No, it's not like that. But Joseph, still, you know, for South Korea, it's one of the major export, you know, K-pop together with the other entertainment shows, you know, from South Korea is very popular in China, in Asia, and now in Western countries too. But if something like this, it happened more than once, it also tarnished the image of this country, right? So what did the government, you know, is there any action the government could do or they are thinking of doing to prevent something like this from happening? Joseph.
First of all,
sorry,
yeah.
I thought you were asking somebody else. Could you repeat your question?
Okay, Joseph. I mean, because this is one of the important part of the export of culture from South Korea to other countries. K-pop and other entertainment shows very popular in many Asian countries and also Western countries here. So, what's the government thinking about that? Instances like this is tarnishing image of the country. Is the government ready to do anything to prevent something like that from happening again?
Well, there's been laws that have been amended and new laws proposed as a result of these issues that have continuously happened. It's also wrong to say that this has been a government-led venture, especially if you look at SN Entertainment, which was one of the first entertainment groups to go abroad. So I think there has been cooperation between private and the government efforts to try to fix this situation. However, the history of the entertainment industry has been one that's plagued with exploiting women as a whole. And so there has been protests here in South Korea from South Korean women, and it also is dehumanizing to believe that that isn't happening as well, since there's been tens of thousands of women who've been coming out onto the streets and also making sure that their voices are heard, that they aren't going to tolerate this situation. That's why we've been seeing a big Me Too movement that has spread across the entire country, from high school to people that are in their 60s, that women are coming together in the country to make sure that the sexism that has been rampant, not only in the entertainment industry but elsewhere, that it no longer becomes a problem. This is something that South Korea is trying to progress at, and it's something that we must acknowledge that South Korean women are fighting for, and not assume that we know all the answers ourselves.
Well, Tankin, what's your take? You seem to disagree with Joseph, what he said about, it's not a particular South Korean problem.
Well, I'm not saying that it was, and I said I made it very clear that something happening somewhere else doesn't justify it in your own country. Two wrongs don't make a right.
No one said it was justification, and I said it wasn't a mitigation as well.
You were equivocating, Joseph. I mean, the issue here is that
no,
this
I'm
is
saying
wrong.
we shouldn't dehumanize a country.
No one is dehumanizing
just like you're doing,
it.
just because
no,
you say that you're half Korean,
dehumanizing.
therefore you know what is happening in the country.
I don't know what's happening in the country, but I did work for Kotra. So, in any event, I'm not going to get into an argument about who loves the country more.
Difference.
The issue here is that this is wrong behavior, and this is not dehumanizing the situation in the Korean people. This is one particular area where a tremendous amount of money is being made at the expense of young people. So, I don't care where this is wrong, and they need to address it. Now, my colleague said, yes, this needs to be addressed. Women in Korea are very upset, as they should be. But this idea that it's happening everywhere else, I don't even know what that means.
Well, very briefly, let me leave a few minutes to Mo over there in the U.S. Here is the question: what's your solution to this problem?
First of all, this is very difficult. I mean, there are many issues like sexual commodification and coercive attitudes and like misogyny. So these are all very difficult problems. But we need to look at the entertainment system very closely. Since now K-pop is like drawing a lot of attention, but so its influence is huge. So I hope many people draw attention to this and then like change something.
Hopefully,
and
so
there are
public
also
pressure will
many
help
other
change
issues.
the thing over there, change the issue for the better. Well, with that, we are coming to the end for today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. You can find me on Twitter, Xu Qinduo. Thank you for watching. See you next time.